I'll put the back.
The camera is there.
Paparazzi.
Oh, should I do that?
All right. All right. It seems that you all noticed when we entered this site, you saw a sign at the outside where it is said, Capernaum, the town of Jesus Christ. Now we explained that in the morning, that we all know that Jesus Christ is from Nazareth, but he chose this place to start his ministry. Now, Capernaum is a short way of saying it in English, which has no meaning at all. It's Kfar Nahum. Kfar means village in Aramaic. And Nahum is the name of a person that might be an important person whom this village or town was dedicated to him. But there is also scholars who suggest that the name of the place is Tel Nahum. Tel Nahum in Aramaic is the border city. As I told you earlier, that we are on the Via Maris Road, which is the connection between Egyptian Empire and the Mesopotamian Empire. So if you are traveling towards the east, this will be the last Canaanite village you will visit, and if you are coming from Mesopotamia, it will be the first town to visit. So, what we will do is that we will talk about it in clockwise. So as we enter the area over there is the market area, where they had, fruits and vegetables from the area over here to sell salted fish, fresh fish, wine, grapes, olives, oil, and so on. The area on top, this area is the working area or the workshop area, or as we say nowadays, industrial zone, where you have the wine press, olive press, salting the fish area. I also mentioned this morning that this area is or was under the province of Herod Philippi, whom he did not give the authority or the power for the Jewish laws to be implemented, or for the Sanhedrin to be active in this area over here, but that does not mean that we didn't have Jewish community in this area. Throughout excavations, they found a synagogue, which is to my left, of 2 levels. The black basalt stone is the native stone of this area over here, volcanic stone, which is the black one, and that is from the 1st century synagogue, which means this is the synagogue that Jesus Christ used to attend. Now it was destroyed by an earthquake, where you have another synagogue built on top of it during the Byzantine era, late 4th century, with the white limestone, as you can see. Now a synagogue is an assembly house. It is a place where the community would gather, talk about their day-to-day issues of the town or city. It is also a place where people would gather when they have religious feasts or occasions like funerals, weddings, circumcision, people celebrating the bar mitzvah, which is the turning point according to the Jewish law. It's a turning point in the life of a human from a child to a man, where a person is responsible on his deeds. And that is usually on the year 12, 13, they will celebrate. Bar means son, and mitzvah means the law. So when the person becomes the son of the law, where he has to preserve it and be responsible. It was never considered to be a prayer house. If you want to pray in the 1st century, there is only one place. You have to go to the temple in Jerusalem. And that's where you would offer your sacrifices over there, because that's the only place where you have the altar. In the year 70, the temple was destructed by Titus, the emperor. But still Jews continued to go on top of the mountain to pray and to wail on the ruins of the second temple. 132, another revolt started by the Jews called Bar Kokhba revolt. And that was ended in 135 by Hadrian the emperor. What he did is that he wanted to break the unity of the people. And that's by erecting pagan temples on top of sites where they used together. So he built a pagan temple dedicated to Jupiter on top of the Temple Mount. And that's when the Jews stopped going on top of the Temple Mount because they didn't want to bow in front of a pagan temple. Since then, they started to pray in the synagogues. It became a prayer house for the Jews. And because they didn't have anymore an altar, they started to do the services at the synagogue. So the service is in a way to substitute for the sacrifices they used to give at the altar in the temple. Okay? Now we all know that Jesus Christ kicked out sellers and money changers from the temple. Why do we need money changers in the area of the temple? As I told you, when you came, you can use your dollars any place you want, so you don't have to buy the local currency to spend. Why did they need money changers? Now, the thing is mainly because you cannot pay the temple tax in a Roman coin. Because what do you have on the Roman coin? Caesar. And who was Caesar? He was not only an emperor, but also considered to be a goddess. So by entering into the temple by a Roman coin means that you are entering the temple of God with a pagan symbol. That's why if you also recall when they came to Jesus Christ with the coin and told him, to whom shall we pay the tax, for the temple or to Caesar? Because they used to pay two taxes, one for the government and one for the temple. And he said, what for Caesar, and what for God, for God. Because in that Roman coin, anyway, you are not allowed to pay the temple. I'm telling you that because as you enter to the synagogue area, there is a stone where you have two sealed pockets, and that used to be the place of a money changer who would change your money as you are coming from Mesopotamia to change money and take the half a shekel, which was the temple tax. Because even after the destruction of the temple, Jews continue to take the temple tax, and that's mainly to have income for the rabbis or priests who are responsible on the synagogues, to maintain the synagogues, and also to save for a third temple to be built. So they already have the money for free, collecting the money from that time. Okay, so also when you go inside the synagogue area, you will find shorter columns, and that was mainly to carry a second floor. During the first century, men and women used to sit together in a synagogue. It was only introduced by the Byzantine Church to separate between men and women during worship. And that's when the Jews started also separating men and women in their synagogues. Jews, in the world, they pray towards Israel. In Israel, they pray toward Jerusalem, and in Jerusalem, they pray towards the temple. When they came over here to excavate, they were astonished because as you enter the synagogue area, you'll be giving your back to Jerusalem. Jerusalem is of that direction. So they were astonished how come they have such a big mistake during that time. And then after cleaning the place, they found a reddish stone at this corner, which means the southeast corner, which is a reddish stone, looked like a sofa, where in the synagogue it is named Moses' chair, where the reader or the Koreh of the scroll or the Torah would read from the book and read. So in other words, the people would go inside with 180 degrees turn and face Jerusalem. Now, also you are now the first day in this land, and you will get to know more and more of our culture. Tomorrow we are going to spend some time in Nazareth and later on in Jerusalem and Bethlehem. You'll find lots of buildings that they have different age of building, because the tradition is that if you can afford it as a father, you will buy a land and build one-floor house, but you will invest more in the foundation so that in the future your kids will build on top of it. And that's why you see a building with 1980 and then 1995 and then 2000, or sometimes still they have skeleton houses still working on it. Sometimes they will all work together to buy a land and to build a new building. So you see the whole building as a new, as one age, but and look sometimes like a palace or a fancy house, but from inside you see them in 5, 6, 7 flats depending on the size of the building. During the first century, they didn't know the techniques of building on top of each other. How do we now know that from the Bible? And that happened in Capernaum. When Jesus Christ was in the house of St. Peter's mother-in-law, and they brought for him the crippled man that they brought him through the roof. It was easier for them because there were many crowds just at the gate of the house. Because the technique was that the house would be built with 4 stone walls, and they were covered with wooden beams, and they covered the ceiling with palm branches. So it is just moving the palm branches and lower him between the two rooms. For such a way of building, you cannot have another floor on top of palm branches. So the tradition that we have nowadays was inherited by the first century people, but it was in a different way. A father would buy a big land and he will build a house in the middle of the land, and then his children will build a second circle, and his grandkids might build a second circle around it. And this area is the residential area where if you were a visitor on this village and you just walk among the residential area, by the size of the insula, of how many cells you have, you would guess the size of the family or the extended family that you are passing by or to visit. Okay? And that's a way of how we also protect our elders. Because you have your sons surrounding you and your grandsons surrounding their parents. So it is a way of protection. All right, so we all know from the Bible that St. Peter is not from this village or town. He is from Bethsaida, about 4 miles to the north of where we are. And we've been to the Church of Multiplication, and when Father read from the Bible, it is written that he fed 5,000, not counting women and children, because the family were counted as one, and that is by the man of the house. Also, just as we mentioned that, if you recall the miracle of Jesus Christ raising the widow's son from death, that woman, or that widow, she was weeping behind a coffin, not only because she lost her only son, but also because she lost her future. The tradition was at that time that a woman cannot live by herself within a community because she will be tempting for other men. So a girl will live with her parents when she gets married with her husband, if she is a widow with her son. If not, she will be kicked out from the community. And as they were not educated at that time, she will have no job. So the only way to survive is to work as a prostitute. So that's why Jesus Christ, or that's why this miracle is mentioned in the in the Bible, because as I told you, he performed many miracles, but only the miracles that are mentioned in the Bible is mainly to have a story behind it or a lesson learned behind it, and that is mainly how to change tradition, because sometimes we follow the tradition more than we follow the Bible itself or the God's law. So I'm telling you that because the house of the mother-in-law of St. Peter is or was in this village, but as she was a widow and it seems that she had no sons because there is no expansion of the cell of the house that she lived in, it was dedicated to her son-in-law where then she can be protected by him and can still live in this community. When people started believing in Jesus Christ, during the 1st and 2nd century, our ancestors, they started what we call nowadays the underground movement, because they couldn't build worship houses. So what they did is that they started churches in the places or houses where Jesus Christ was. And that's why our sites are preserved. So the people over here, we call it in Latin Domus Ecclesiae, the home church. That's where they chose to have the St. Peter house in this town to be one of the first churches of the Christians in the Holy Land. And when during the Byzantine period they started building churches, 325 when St. Helena came, she started building churches, and that's when it started building all the rest of the churches. And that's where you see the expansion of the house by a Byzantine church and then by a bigger Byzantine church as to respond to the expansion of Christians in this region. Okay, so where you see the spaceship-like church, under it you have the excavations of St. Peter House, and where you have the excavations of the Byzantine churches as well. Just to close the circle, at the end over there you have the statue of St. Peter stepping on a rock with a shepherd's stick with the keys to heaven and with the fish. The rock to remind you of you are the rock, and on this rock I will build my church. The keys to remind you the keys to heaven. Whatever you loose on earth is loose in heaven, and whatever you tie in earth it is tied in heaven. And the stick as a shepherd of where we've been, John 21, the primacy, the first book over the shepherd, and of course the fish as he was a fisherman. All those decorated stones are from the period of the late 4th century, where you have the decorated stones decorating the synagogue of the late 4th century. Okay, just before ending over here this small lecture, again, if you read anything from the Bible, most probably it happened over here because Jesus Christ lived here in Capernaum and on the shores of the Sea of Galilee. Whenever you read that Jesus Christ was in Jerusalem, most probably he was joining the Galilean to go to Jerusalem 3 times a year, and that's during the 3 pilgrimage feasts, Passover, Tabernacle, and the Pentecost. So it is suggested by historians that Jesus Christ visited Jerusalem about 10 times in his ministry life, where the last one was his triumphal entrance to Jerusalem, where he was arrested and crucified and of course ascended. So, what I want you to do also is just remind you of what I told you when we were at the booth. If you just look around you and just put in your imagination that you are here 2,000 years ago, you might see that Galilee was hanging around with the people over here, checking on people, that he was the rabbi, that he was the teacher, that he was the Lord Jesus Christ.
Many passages in the Bible mention Capernaum, that's for very good reasons, as Abraham was just saying, all the things that happened in Christ's life. So I'm not going to read all of those. I will just read one, and it's not the most flattering towards Capernaum, but I think it can serve as a spiritual reflection for us, because one of the things that happened in Capernaum is the Bread of Life sermon here in the synagogue. And people were, of course, thrilled by the Messiah who multiplied the loaves and fishes and followed him, and still hung on his words when he was talking about being the bread come down from heaven insofar as he is the wisdom of God. But then when he started talking about eating the flesh of the Son of Man and drinking his blood, they walked away in disgust. And I think it's a very good idea for us to think about what we would have done, whether our own traditions and our own openness or our own closed-mindedness would also have prevented us from recognizing who Christ is. And so the passage that I'm choosing to read here warns people about spiritual blindness, about being so caught up and wedded to our own ideas that we don't take the opportunity to respond to salvation when it is offered to us. Then Jesus began to upbraid the cities where most of his mighty works had been done, because they did not repent. Woe to you, Chorazin! Woe to you, Bethsaida! For if the mighty works done in you had been done in Tyre and Sidon, they would have repented long ago in sackcloth and ashes. But I tell you, it shall be more tolerable on the day of judgment for Tyre and Sidon than for you. And you, Capernaum, will you be exalted to heaven? You shall be brought down to Hades. For if the mighty works done in you had been done in Sodom, it would have remained until this day. But I tell you that it shall be more tolerable on that day, on the day of judgment, the land of Sodom, than for you.
Alright, so you have a little bit more than 15 minutes. So at 3:20, please be back on the bus where you can go around. If the church is open, you can go up the church and then you see the glass tiles where you can see through it at the excavations. Otherwise, you can go under the church where it is also raised in order to let the excavations be obvious for people. The synagogue, remember, you have also some openings inside where you see the black stones. That's the first century synagogue that Jesus Christ ascended, and the white one is the reformed.
Okay, let's look at the Jesus and Mary. This.
Do you know the email photos?
Okay, let's go. Kanina wala eh. Ito?
Tutupwa. Yan, tutupwa. Yan. Yan, yan, çalanduşta. Yan, çalanduşta.
Anche lei delle capponette, ma io sono magari vinto questo giù dall'alto, non stai capponette.
Anyway, yeah, prepara magari uno la scacca. Ci aspettiamo così.